If you are a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you have come to the right place. Because that is all we do here. We upload new stories every single week. So, if that is of interest to you, please offer to help the like button move their heavy furniture. But once you get the couch stuck in the doorway, just tell them you forgot something in the car. Drive away and block their number for the rest of eternity. Also, please subscribe. We believe that science can explain everything. But today's story is about a woman who became a battleground between two worlds. A story that ended with a courtroom trying to decide if the devil can be a legal defense. Are you ready? Good. Let's get into it. Imagine it is 1968. You are in Bavaria, West Germany. You are a bright, beautiful, and deeply religious 19-year-old girl named Anneliese Michel. You are a university student. You have a future. You have a boyfriend. But then, the logic of your world begins to crack. It starts with a seizure. You find yourself unable to breathe. You're just demons. The voices identify themselves as Lucifer, Cain, Nero, and Judas Iscariot. And here is the part that defies all medical logic. Anneliese stops eating. She says the demons will not allow her to consume food. She survives only on a few sips of water, and occasionally eating flies and spiders she finds on the floor. The logic of the human body says you should die in weeks. But Anneliese continues to survive for months. She exhibits superhuman strength. During the rituals, she tosses grown men across the room like they are rag dolls. She barks like a dog for days. She screams in voices so deep and so distorted that the recordings still make people's skin crawl. 50 years later, her family stays in the house. They watch their daughter waste away. The logic of a parent says, call an ambulance. Get her a feeding tube. Save her life. But the Michel family and the priests believe they are saving her soul and that her body is a necessary sacrifice. By June of 1960, everyone expected. He realizes that there is no logic that can bridge the gap between medical science and the screams on those tapes. But before the sentence is handed down, something even stranger happens. Because even in death, Anneliese Michel was not finished. Even after the trial, the logic-defying events did not stop. 2 years after Anneliese was buried, a nun claimed to have a vision. She said that Anneliese's body had not rotted. She said the girl was incorruptible, a sign from God that she was a saint and not a victim of mental illness. In February of 1978, under the cover of darkness, the Michel family and the priests exhumed her body. They opened the coffin, hoping for a miracle. They wanted to show the world that even though she died, her body remained perfect, untouched by the grave. The official report says the body showed normal signs of decay. But the people who were there, the ones who saw her, they whispered a different story. They said she looked exactly as she did on the day she died. The trial finally ended. The parents and the priests were found guilty of negligent homicide, but the sentence defied all legal standards. They were given only 6 months in prison, and even that was suspended. The judge basically said, "You are guilty, but you have already suffered enough." Today, the grave of Anneliese Michel is a place of pilgrimage. People from all over the world travel to that small town in Bavaria to pray and to leave flowers. But the question remains, and it is a question that science cannot answer. Was Anneliese Michel a victim of a medical system that failed to understand her? Was she just a girl with epilepsy and schizophrenia who was talked into a nightmare by people she trusted? Or was she exactly what she said she was? A girl who stood at the gates of hell and fought a battle that we are too logical to understand. If you listen to the tapes, if you hear that voice, that gurgle, that scream of Judas, you have to ask yourself, can a human throat really make those sounds? Can a human mind invent that much? Hate. The next time you hear a floorboard creak or you feel a sudden icy chill in a place that should be warm, do not just tell yourself it is the air conditioning. Do not just trust in the logic of your eyes, because Anneliese Michel proved that sometimes the thing that is screaming in the dark is not looking for a doctor. It is looking for a soul. If you are a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you have come to the right place. Because that is all we do here. We upload new stories every single week. So, if that is of interest to you, please offer to help the like button shovel the snow out of their driveway, but then deliberately pile all that snow right back in front of their garage door, so they are trapped inside for the rest of the winter. Also, please subscribe and turn on all notifications so you do not miss any of our weekly uploads. Now, before we get into today's story, I want you to just take a second, sit back. I mean, really lean back into your chair. Let the weight of the world leave your shoulders. Grab yourself a fresh cup of coffee, make it black, make it strong, or maybe a handful of peanuts, because we are going to be here for a very long time. Today, we are not just looking at a crime scene. We are looking at a house that could breathe, a house that watched, a house that invited a monster in for dinner and let him stay for dessert. Are you ready? Good. Let's get into it. Imagine it is March of 1922. You are in the heart of Bavaria, Germany. The air is so cold, it feels like it is trying to shatter your teeth. You live on a farm called Hinterkaifeck. It is a lonely, triangular piece of land surrounded by dark and thick woods. The nearest neighbor is almost a kilometer away. Out here, silence is not just a lack of noise, it is a physical presence. You are Andreas Gruber, the owner of this farm. You are a hard man, a man of routine. You do not believe in ghosts, and you certainly do not believe in fear. But one morning, as you step out onto your porch to start your chores, you see something that stops your heart mid-beat. In the fresh, white blanket of snow that fell overnight. There are tracks, human footprints. They start at the edge of the dark forest. They move with purpose, step by step, sinking deep into the powder, heading straight toward your machine shed. You follow them, your breath hitching in the frozen air. You check the shed. The door is slightly ajar. You check the barn. You check the house. And then you realize that the logic of the situation has just broken. You look back at the woods. You look at the tracks leading to your door. And you realize there are no return tracks. Someone or something walked from the forest into your home. And according to the snow, they never left. You do not tell your wife. You do not tell your daughter. You tell yourself it is just a prank, maybe a traveler. But that night, as the sun dips below the horizon and the house grows dark, you hear it above your head in the attic. Creak, creak, creak. It is not the wind. It is not the wood settling. It is the sound of rhythmic, human footsteps pacing back and forth directly above where you sleep. You grab your lantern. You grab your heavy tool, and you climb the stairs. You swing the attic door open, expecting to find a burglar or a drifter. But the attic is empty. There is nothing but dust and old crates. Yet, as you turn to leave, you notice a newspaper on the floor. A newspaper from the city. A city you have not visited in months. A newspaper that was not there yesterday. You look at the lock on the door. It has been tampered with. Someone has been watching you. Someone has been living in the spaces between your walls, listening to your conversations, smelling your food, and waiting for the exact moment when the standard life of the Gruber family would come to a violent, screaming end. But here is where the logic truly begins to defy us, because Andreas Gruber did not call the police. He did not take his family and run to the neighbors. He stayed. He went back to bed. He chose to live in a house with an invisible guest, and that decision was the last mistake he would ever make. Now, for the next few days, from March 31st to April 1st, the world outside Hinterkaifeck began to notice a strange, heavy silence coming from the farm. It was like the entire property had been placed under a glass jar. The mail began to pile up in this small wooden box at the edge of the road. The local school noticed that 7-year-old Kazilia did not show up for class. Neighbors looked toward the farmhouse, and they saw smoke rising from the chimney, but they did not see a single soul moving in the yard. No one was hauling water. No one was tending to the horses. But inside that house, things were far from silent. I want you to put yourself in the shoes of Victoria, the daughter. You are a widow, a mother, trying to keep your family together in this isolated fortress of wood and stone. You have felt the eyes on the back of your neck for days. You have seen the terrified look in your father's eyes, the man who is never afraid. It is the evening of Friday, March 31st. The sun has just collapsed behind the tree line, leaving the farm in a bruising shade of purple and black. Suddenly, you hear a noise. It is coming from the barn. It is not the usual sound of restless livestock. It is a rhythmic thud, a sound of something being moved. You look at your mother. You look at your father. There is no more ignoring the guest in the attic. The intruder is not hiding in the shadows anymore. He is calling you. One by one, the family begins to walk toward the barn. Think about the logic here. Why wouldn't they go together? Why wouldn't they take a lantern and a gun out here in the year 1922? You are alone. Fear does strange things to the human brain. It makes you move in a trance. Your father goes first. He walks across the cold, muddy yard. The heavy barn door creaks as he swings it open. He steps into the darkness. He doesn't even have time to scream. Standing in the shadows, perfectly silent, perfectly prepared, is a figure holding a pickaxe. With one swift overhead arc, the heavy iron blade finds its mark. Your father collapses into the hay, and the killer, he doesn't run. He doesn't panic. He simply drags the body into a corner, and he waits, because he knows the rest of you are coming. Your mother is next. She calls out for her husband. She steps into the same dark barn, her eyes searching the shadows. She sees a movement. She thinks it is Andreas. But before she can speak, the pickaxe swings again. Then it is your turn. Victoria, you walk into that barn with your young daughter, little Casilia, clutching your skirt. You walk into a slaughterhouse that smells of iron and old wood. You see the shapes in the corner. You see the glint of the metal. You die in the same spot as your parents. And your daughter, the person who did this, did not show mercy to a 7-year-old. She was struck down right there, next to the people who were supposed to protect her. But here is where the story moves from a tragedy to something deeply, deeply mysterious. The killer has now murdered 4 people in the barn, but there are still 2 people left in the house. The new maid, Maria, who had just arrived that very afternoon, and your youngest son, 2-year-old Joseph, who is sleeping peacefully in his crib. The killer leaves the barn. He walks back across the yard, his boots clicking on the frozen ground. He enters the kitchen. He walks past the warm stove. He heads straight for the maid's room. Maria never even got to unpack her bags. She was killed in her bed, a stranger in a house of death. And then the killer walks into the nursery. He looks down at 2-year-old Joseph. In a standard murder mystery, this is where the killer flees. He is finished with his gruesome work. He should be miles away before the sun comes up. But the person at Hinterkaifeck, he was not finished. He did not want to leave, because for the next 3 days, the lights at Hinterkaifeck would stay on. The chimney would continue to smoke. The cows would be fed. The bread would be eaten. The killer was no longer an intruder. He was the new master of the house. Now, I want you to really think about the logic of a crime. Usually, a killer wants 2 things. They want silence, and they want distance. They want to be as far away from the bodies as humanly possible before the sun rises. But the person at Hinterkaifeck, he was different. For the next 72 hours, while the bodies of the Gruber family lay cold and stiff in the barn, the farmhouse remained alive. Imagine you are a neighbor passing by on a Saturday morning. You look toward the farm. You see smoke curling lazily from the chimney. You think to yourself, "Oh, the Grubers are just having a quiet weekend." But inside, a monster was making himself at home. The killer did not just leave. He stayed. He walked into the kitchen, past the bloodstains, and he felt hungry. He sat at the family's table. He ate their bread. He drank their milk. He used their stove to cook himself a warm meal, while the people who owned that food were rotting just a few meters away. This is the part that defies everything we know about human psychology. The killer even tended to the farm. He went out to the barn, stepping over the bodies of Andreas, Kazilia, and Victoria, and he fed the cattle. He gave them water. He made sure the horses were cared for. Why was he trying to pretend everything was normal, or did he truly believe that he now owned this place? Think about the sheer, cold-blooded arrogance of it. On Sunday night, a neighbor saw a light moving in the yard. Someone was carrying a lantern. They assumed it was Andreas checking on the animals. But it was not Andreas. It was the man who had split Andreas's skull open only 48 hours prior. The killer was living a parallel life. He slept in their beds. He listened to the wind howling against the walls. He sat in the darkness, surrounded by the ghosts of the people he had just slaughtered. And for 3 whole days, no one knew. But on Tuesday, April 4th, the silence finally became too loud. A repairman named Michael Pohl arrived at the farm to fix a broken engine. He knocked on the door. No answer. He shouted. No answer. He spent hours working in the yard right outside the barn. He noticed the dog, the family's loyal guard dog, was tied up, barking frantically, looking thin and terrified. Michael finished his work and left, but he felt a chill in his spine. Something was wrong. Finally, the neighbors had seen enough. They gathered a group of men and walked toward the farmhouse. They pushed open the barn door, and the world changed forever. They found them, stacked like cordwood, covered in hay. And as the men stumbled back in horror, they noticed something that made their skin crawl. The kitchen was still warm. The table was set. The killer had escaped only minutes before they arrived. He had not been running for 3 days. He had been waiting. And as the police began to investigate, they realized the most terrifying truth of all. The killer did not need to break in. He did not need to force a window. Because, according to the evidence, the monster had been living in that house long before the first drop of blood was ever spilled. The investigation into the Hinterkaifeck murders became one of the most frustrating and bizarre cases in history. The police questioned over 100 suspects. They looked at neighbors. They looked at drifters. They even looked at Victoria's husband, who was reported dead in World War I. Some people believed he had survived and came back to take revenge on the family that had moved on without him. But no one was ever charged. One of the main suspects was a neighbor named Lorenz S. Cichlietnbur. He was the one who led the search party. He was the one who pushed open the barn door. And, according to witnesses, he was the one who moved the bodies. Before the police arrived, was he trying to help or was he trying to hide? Evidence Schlittenbauer had a complicated history with Victoria. They had a child together, but Andreas, the father, did not approve. The logic says he had a motive, but there was never enough proof to lock him away. In the end, the police did something truly desperate. They sent the skulls of the Gruber family to see l'Arviewints in the city. They hoped that psychics could talk to the dead and find the name of the killer. But the dead remained silent. The farmhouse at Hinterkaifeck was torn down a year later. The neighbors could not stand to look at it anymore. They wanted to bury the memory of the monster in the attic. But as the wooden beams were ripped apart and the walls were smashed, they found something that chilled them to the bone. In the insulation of the attic, they found hidden spaces. They found hollowed-out sections where a man could sit and watch the family below through the cracks in the ceiling. They found evidence that the guest had been there for weeks, maybe months. So, here is the question I want to leave you with. Tonight, when you turn off your lights and you hear a small creak in your ceiling, or when you find a window that you could have sworn you locked, but it is now slightly ajar, do not just assume it is the wind. Do not assume your mind is playing tricks on you, because sometimes the logic is wrong. Sometimes the shadows are not empty, and sometimes the guest in your attic is just waiting for you to fall asleep. If you are a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you have come to the right place, because that is all we do here. We upload new stories every single week. So, if that is of interest to you, please offer to help the like button paint their living room. But instead of paint, use invisible ink and tell them it looks minimalist, then charge them double and block their number. Also, please subscribe and turn on all notifications. We are closing our session today with the most bizarre case in the history of South America. Now, before we get into today's story, I want you to just take a second, sit back, grab your final cup of coffee for the day, make it black, make it strong, because we are going to a place where logic goes to die. Are you ready? Good. Let's get into it. Imagine it is August 17th, 1966. You are in Niterói, Brazil. You are one of two men, Manuel Pereira de Cruz or Miguel Jose Viana. You are both electronic technicians. You are smart. You are practical. You deal with circuits and wires and logic every day. But today, you are doing something that defies everything you know about science. You tell your families that you are going to buy some supplies for work. You get on a bus. You arrive in a new town. You buy 2 waterproof raincoats and a bottle of water. And then you start to climb. You are heading to the top of Morro do Ventum, the hill of the 20 cents. It is a steep, difficult climb. The weather is turning bad. It's starting to rain, but you aren't turning back. You reach the top and you lie down. Side by side, you are wearing your neat suits under your new raincoats. You look like you are waiting for a meeting. But then, you reach into your pockets. You pull out 2 handmade, heavy, lead masks. The kind of masks people use to protect their eyes from radiation. You put them on. You close your eyes. The logic of a technician says, "This is impossible." Why would you wear lead masks on a grassy hill, in the rain? But you aren't just waiting. You have a notebook. And the final entry in that notebook is a set of instructions that would haunt the Brazilian police for the next 60 years. The note says, 16 to 30, be at the agreed place. 18 to 30, swallow the capsules. After the effect, protect metals. Wait for the mask signal. Wait for the signal. From where? 3 days later, a young boy flying a kite finds your bodies. And when the police arrive, they realize that death was just the beginning of the mystery. Now, I want you to imagine the pure confusion of the investigators. When the police reach the top of that hill, they are looking for a crime. They are looking for blood. They are looking for a struggle. But they find nothing. You and your friend are lying there peacefully. Your hands are at your sides. Your suits are still sharp. There are no signs of violence. No footprints around the bodies except your own. But then, the investigators look at your eyes, or where your eyes should be. They lift the heavy, crude, lead masks. They were cut by hand from a sheet of lead. The logic of a technician says these masks were made to protect against a blinding light, a light that is not from this world. But here is the part that defies all medical science. The coroner performs an autopsy. He is looking for poison. He is looking for the capsules mentioned in your note. But the toxicology report comes back inconclusive. Why? Because your internal organs are perfectly healthy. There is no sign of struggle, no sign of heart failure, no sign of trauma. It is as if your souls were simply vacuumed out of your bodies. The police search your workshop back home. They find more lead and a book about scientific spiritualism. The logic starts to take a dark turn. You weren't just technicians. You were part of a secret group that believed you could use electronics to contact. Beyond, you believed that at 18 to 30, at that specific spot on the hill, a portal would open. The capsules weren't poison. They were meant to expand your consciousness. And the masks? They were there to protect you from the radiation of the visitors. But then, a witness comes forward, a woman named Gracinda Barbosa. She was driving past the hill at the exact time the note said to wait for the signal. She didn't see 2 men in raincoats. She saw an object. She described it as a multicolored, glowing disc hovering directly above the spot where you were lying. If the logic of science says you died of natural causes, then why did the grass underneath your bodies turn yellow and die in a perfect circular pattern? And why did your watches both stop at the exact same second? Now, let's look at the hidden logic behind your workshop doors. The police didn't just find lead in your house. They found a secret laboratory. You and your friend weren't just fixing televisions. You were building something that science says is impossible. Neighbors reported that for weeks they heard high-pitched, screeching sounds coming from your garage. They saw flashes of blue light in the middle of the night. You were trying to tune into a frequency that doesn't exist on any radio dial. The logic of the investigators was simple. They were crazy. But then, they found the receipts. You had been spending huge amounts of money on high-voltage components and strange, radioactive materials. Why would two simple technicians need material that is used in nuclear reactors? And then, there is the money. When you left for the hill, you were carrying a large amount of cash, enough to buy a car. But when the police found your bodies, the money was gone. But your wallets were still in your pockets. Your expensive watches were still on your wrists. A thief would have taken the watches. A thief would have taken the jewelry. But the money vanished as if it had been traded. Think about the instructions in your notebook again. Protect metals. Wait for the mask signal. In physics, lead is used to block X-rays and gamma radiation. If you were expecting a signal, you were expecting something so powerful it could burn your eyes right out of your skull. The police discovered that you were part of a secret society called the Technicians of the Unknown. You believed that extraterrestrial life wasn't just in the stars. You believed they were here, and you believed you had an appointment. But as the investigation hit a dead end, a final, terrifying piece of evidence surfaced. A local priest who had been talking to one of your associates claimed that you weren't the first ones to go up that hill. He claimed that this had happened before. Now, for the cold, final logic of the Hill of Spirits, the investigators discovered something that changed everything. For years earlier, in 1962, another electronic technician was found on a different hill in a different city. His name was Hermes de Castro. And just like you, he was wearing a suit. Just like you, he was wearing a raincoat. And just like you, he was wearing a handmade lead mask. The logic of a coincidence is impossible. This was a repeatable experiment. The police began to realize that you weren't victims of a crime. You were pioneers. You were trying to cross a bridge that was never meant for human feet. But here is the part that will keep you awake tonight. The Brazilian military suddenly stepped in. They took the masks. They took the notebook. They took the files. And then they classified everything. They told the public, "There is nothing to see here. Move on." But they didn't explain why the radiation levels on that hill remained 3 times higher than normal for decades. They didn't explain why your bodies, despite the heat and the rain, showed no signs of normal decomposition for days. It was as if time itself had slowed down around you. So we are left with the ultimate, a logical question. Did the signal ever come? Maybe you didn't die because something went wrong. Maybe you died because something went right. Maybe the capsules worked. Maybe the masks protected your eyes, but they couldn't protect your life. Perhaps, as you lay there in the rain, the visitors arrived, and they saw two men who were ready to trade their biology for knowledge. Tonight, when you are looking at your phone or your computer or any piece of technology, I want you to remember Manuel and Miguel. They were technicians, just like us. They believed in wires. They believed in signals. They believed that if you build the right tool, you can talk to the unknown. But be careful what you build, and be careful what you ask for, because the next time you see a light in the sky and you feel the urge to follow it, do not bring a camera. Do not bring a friend. And for God's sake, do not put on the mask, because some signals are not meant to be heard. They are meant to be followed. If you are a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you have come to the right place. Because that is all we do here. We upload new stories every single week. So, if that is of interest to you, please offer to help the like button move their heavy refrigerator. But once you get it into the middle of the kitchen, just take the doors off, sit inside it, and refuse to leave until they promise to subscribe to this channel. Also, please subscribe and turn on all notifications so you do not miss any of our weekly uploads. Now, before we get into today's story, I want you to just take a second, sit back. Really lean back into your chair. Let the weight of the world leave your shoulders. Grab yourself a fresh cup of coffee, make it black, make it strong, or maybe a handful of peanuts, because we are going to be here for a very long time. Today, we are looking at a story that challenges the very logic of our reality. We like to think that the sky is a well-mapped place. We have radar. We have satellites. We have communication. But today's story is about a man who flew into a part of the sky that wasn't on any map. A man who reported something that science says cannot exist. Are you ready? Good. Let's get into it. Imagine it is October 21st, 1978. You are in Melbourne, Australia. You are 20-year-old Frederick Valentin. You are a young, enthusiastic pilot, and tonight you are taking a solo flight in your Cessna 182. The weather is perfect. The sky is clear. You are flying over Bays Strait, heading toward King Island. It is a routine trip. You've done this before. You are relaxed. You are enjoying the view of the dark ocean beneath the moonlight. But at 7:06 p.m., the logic of your routine begins to shiver. You key your radio, and you contact air traffic control. You ask a simple, standard question. Is there any known traffic below 5,000 feet? The controller, Steve Roby, checks his radar. He looks at the screen. It is empty. He replies, no known traffic. Why? And your voice changes. It's no longer relaxed. It's confused. You say, there is a large aircraft below me. It has 4 bright landing lights. It just passed over me at a very high speed. The controller is baffled. There are no large planes scheduled in that area. He asks for a description. You tell him, "It is long and metallic. It is shiny, and it is moving in a way that no airplane should move." You say the object is playing a game with you. It flies over you, then it disappears, then it suddenly appears right in front of your windshield. The logic of physics is starting to break because you report that this object is now hovering directly above your plane. And then you say the words that still haunt the Australian government 40 years later. You say, "It is not an aircraft." Now think about the crushing reality of that moment. You are the air traffic controller, Steve Roby. You are sitting in a warm, safe office. But through your headset, you are listening to a 20-year-old boy who is absolutely terrified. Frederick says the object is now stationary right on top of him. He describes it as having a strange green light and a metallic oily surface. Then the logic of the engine fails. Frederick reports, "My engine is coughing. It's idling roughly." In aviation, if you have engine trouble, you look for a place to land. But Frederick is over the ocean, in the dark, and he is being shadowed by something that doesn't exist on radar. He says his final words to the tower, his voice trembling. "It is hovering, and it is not an aircraft." And then, for the next 17 seconds, something happens that defies every single law of acoustics. The microphone stays open, but Frederick is not speaking. Instead, the controller hears a sound, a loud, harsh, metallic, scraping sound. It sounds like two massive pieces of steel being rubbed together with incredible force. And then, silence. The logic of a plane crash is predictable. You find oil slicks. You find debris. You find something. The Australian government launched one of the largest searches in history. They used ships. They used planes. They used sonar. They searched every inch of the Bass Strait. But they found nothing. No fuel. No wingtips. No life jackets. It was as if Frederick Valentic and his entire airplane were simply erased from the sky. The authorities tried to find a logical explanation. They said maybe he became disoriented. They said maybe he was flying upside down, and the lights he saw were the reflections of his own plane in the water. But that logic falls apart, because if he crashed into the water upside down, the wreckage would still be there. And then a witness from the ground stepped forward, a witness who saw something that makes the story even more insane. Now, let's look at the bizarre physical evidence. On that very same evening, just minutes before Frederick disappeared, a man named Roy Manifold was at Cape Otway taking photos of the sunset. He was using a high-speed camera, taking shots every few seconds. He didn't see anything with his eyes, but when he got the film developed, his heart stopped. In one of the photos, there is a dark, metallic, saucer-shaped object bursting out of the water at an incredible speed. The analysis of the photos showed that the object was moving at nearly 200 miles per hour. The logic of the skeptics started to crumble. Was this the same aircraft Frederick was screaming about? Was it an unidentified, submerged object? But then, the story takes a turn into the impossible. Weeks after the disappearance, a farmer in a remote part of Australia claimed he saw a Cessna, the same model as Frederick's, sitting in a field. But it wasn't just sitting there. He claimed he saw a large metallic craft hovering above the plane, and it appeared to be attaching cables to it. The logic of a kidnapping is one thing, but the kidnapping of an entire airplane while it is flying at 5,000 feet, that is pure madness. But wait, it gets even darker. The Australian government kept the radio transcripts classified for years. They didn't want the public to hear those 17 seconds of metallic scratching. Why? What were they hiding? And then a final piece of news arrived from a source thousands of miles away. Someone claimed to have found Frederick, but he wasn't in Australia, and it wasn't 1978 anymore. Now for the twist that defies every single law of reality. Years after Frederick Valentik vanished, a report emerged from the former Soviet Union. It claimed that a group of scientists had discovered a metallic plate in a remote mountain range, and on that plate was a message. The message was written in English. It was a plea for help. It was signed Frederick Valentik. Now, the logic of the world says this is a hoax, a cruel joke. How could a pilot from Australia end up in a Soviet mountain range, leaving messages on metallic plates? It's impossible. But the family of Frederick, they don't care about logic anymore. His father, Guido Valentik, spent every day of the rest of his life staring at the ocean. He believed until his final breath that his son was not dead. He believed Frederick had been borrowed by something from somewhere else. Think about those 17 seconds of metallic scratching one more time. Modern sound analysts have looked at that audio. They say it doesn't sound like a crash. It sounds like a can opener peeling back the roof of a car. It sounds like a hull being opened. The Australian Department of Transport eventually closed the file. Their official conclusion? Cause unknown. But for those of us who look at the facts, the conclusion is much more disturbing. If Frederick was disoriented, where is the plane? If he ran away to start a new life, how did he do it in the middle of the ocean with no radar seeing him leave? The logic points to a hole in our understanding of the universe. So tonight, when you are outside and you see a light moving across the stars, do not just assume it is a satellite. Do not just assume it is a commercial flight heading to Sydney, because on October 21st, 1978, Frederick Valentik saw a light, and he followed the rules. He called for help. He stayed on the radio, and all it got him was an eternity in the dark. The sky is a very big place, and sometimes the things that fly in it are not looking for a runway. They are looking for you. If you are a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you have come to the right place. Because that is all we do here. We upload new stories every single week. So, if that is of interest to you, please offer to help the like button water their garden, but then, accidentally, leave the hose running until their entire basement is flooded, and then just wave goodbye and drive away. Also, please subscribe and turn on all notifications so you do not miss any of our weekly uploads. Now, before we get into today's story, I want you to just take a second, sit back. I mean, really lean back into your chair. Let the weight of the world leave your shoulders. Grab yourself a fresh cup of coffee, make it black, make it strong, or maybe a handful of peanuts, because we are going to be here for a very long time. Today, we are looking at a story about the price of a dream. We are taught that if we work hard and save our money, we can buy a piece of paradise, a place where our children can run free, a place where we can finally exhale. But today's story proves that sometimes your dream house has already chosen its own master. Are you ready? Good. Let's get into it. Imagine it is June of 2014. You are Derek Broaddus. You have worked your whole life to buy this moment. You just closed on a $1.3 million home at 657 Boulevard in Westfield, New Jersey. It is a beautiful 6-bedroom colonial house. It is perfect. You are at the house alone, doing some light painting before your wife and 3 children move in. It is a warm, quiet evening. You walk out to the mailbox, expecting to find utility bills or junk mail, but instead you find a thick, white envelope. There is no return address. The handwriting is strange. It is blocky and aggressive. You open it, and as you read the first line, the warmth of the summer evening disappears. The letter says, "Dearest new neighbor at 657 Boulevard, allow me to welcome you to the neighborhood." It sounds friendly at first, but then the logic begins to shift. The letter continues, 657 Boulevard has been the subject of my family for decades now. My grandfather watched the house in the 19-20s. My father watched it in the 19-60s. And now it is MY time. Do you know the history of the house? Do you know what lies within the walls of 657 Boulevard? Why are you here? I will find out. Your heart begins to hammer against your ribs. You look around the quiet street. You see neighbors mowing their lawns. You see people walking their dogs. Everything looks normal, but the letter gets more personal. It says, "I see you have brought young blood to the house. Was that your plan? Once I know their names, I will call to them and draw them to me." The writer calls himself the Watcher. You think it is a prank, a sick joke from a jealous neighbor. You call the police. They tell you it is probably nothing, just someone being weird. But a few days later, another letter arrives, and this time, the Watcher knows things that no one should know. He knows the nicknames you call your children inside the house. He knows which room is the nursery. He knows what time you go to bed. And he asks a terrifying question. Have they found what is in the walls? Yet? In time, they will. I am pleased to know your names now, and the name of the young blood you have brought to me. The logic of your safety is gone. You haven't even moved in yet, and you realize you are not just buying a house. You are being invited into a trap. Now, I want you to imagine the paranoia that starts to rot your brain. You are Derek Broaddus. You have spent your life savings on this house. But now, you cannot even bring your children inside the front door. You are staying in a hotel or with relatives while you go to the house alone every day to work on the renovations. But you are not working anymore. You are standing by the windows, peering through the blinds. You are watching the neighbors. You see the elderly couple, the Langfords, who live next door. They have a porch that looks directly into your sunroom. The watcher's letter said, I see you in the sunroom. You are painting. The logic is crushing you. If someone can see you in the sunroom, they must be right there. You look at the Langfords. Are they the watcher? They have lived there since the 19-60s. That matches the letter. But then you look at the house on the other side. You see a man sitting in a lawn chair, just staring at your house. He doesn't wave. He doesn't smile. He just watches. You hire private investigators. You hire former FBI agents. You spend thousands of dollars trying to find a ghost. They tell you the DNA on the envelopes belongs to a woman. A woman? You look at every woman on the street with new, terrified eyes. Is it the lady who walks her dog every morning at 7 a.m.? Is it the grandmother who brings you cookies with a fake smile? Then the third letter arrives. This one is aggressive. It says, 657 Boulevard is turning into a construction site. I do not like what you are doing to the house. You are making it ugly. And then the letter asks about your children. Again, the young blood, they haven't come to play in the basement yet. Why are you keeping them away? The house is lonely. It needs them. The logic of the neighborhood is now a nightmare. You go to the police. Again, you demand action. They question the neighbors. They do DNA swabs. They look at everyone, but they find nothing. No fingerprints. No digital trail. The watcher is a phantom who knows the layout of your home better than you do. He mentions the dumbwaiter, a small elevator for food inside the walls. He says, I am glad you found the dumbwaiter. It is a good place to hide, isn't it? You didn't even know there was a dumbwaiter until you ripped down a wall that morning. Think about that for a second. The watcher knew what was behind your walls before you did. You start to think, maybe the house. is alive. Maybe the letters are coming from the inside. You decide you cannot move in. You try to sell the house. But the news has leaked. Everyone in the country knows about the Watcher. No one wants to buy a house that is being stalked by a shadow. You are trapped. You own a $1.3 million coffin. And as you sit in the dark of your empty living room, you hear a sound in the basement, a heavy, slow thump, and you realize the Watcher isn't just watching. He is waiting for you to break. Now, here is where the story defies all human sympathy. You are Derek Broaddus. You are living a nightmare. You have lost your money. You have lost your peace of mind. And you are terrified for your children. But as the weeks turn into months, the neighborhood starts to turn against you. Think about the twisted logic of a small town. The neighbors, the people who were supposed to be your friends, they start to whisper. They say, "Isn't it strange? No one else ever got a letter. Only the Broaddus family." They start to form a theory that is as cold as the letters themselves. They think you are the Watcher. They believe you bought a house you couldn't afford. They think you had buyer's remorse and you created a monster to get out of the contract. They think you wrote those terrifying words about your own children just to sue the previous owners or to get a movie deal. Can you imagine the pure agony of that? You are being stalked by a phantom, and now the world thinks you are the phantom. The police, under pressure from the town, start to look at you differently. They look at your handwriting. They look at your bank accounts. They find nothing, but the damage is done. You are now an outcast in your own dream. You decide to take a stand. You apply to the town board to tear down the house. You want to smash 657 Boulevard into dust. You want to divide the land and build 2 new houses. You think, if I destroy the house, I destroy the Watcher. But the town says, no. They say the house is historic. They say it would ruin the look of the street. They choose the bricks and mortar of a building over the safety of your family. And then a new letter arrives. But this one is not like the others. This one is personal in a way that makes your blood turn to icy. The Watcher says, "The house is crying. It doesn't like what you are doing. You are trying to kill it. But the house cannot be killed. I am still here. I am always here. And I am watching to see who will be the first to crack." You realize, then, that you are not just fighting a person. You are fighting an obsession. You have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on lawyers and security guards and investigators. You are broke. You are broken. And as you look at the beautiful $1.3 million home, you realize it is no longer a house. It is a predator, and it has already devoured your life. But the biggest shock is still to come, because years later, when you finally manage to rent the house to someone else, someone who doesn't believe in ghosts, the letters stop. For the new tenants, there is silence. Why? Did the Watcher finally get what he wanted? Or was he just waiting for a new game to begin? In 2019, 5 years after the nightmare began, Derek and Maria Broaddus finally sold the house. They sold it for $950,000. That is a loss of over $400,000, not counting the money they spent on private investigators and lawyers. They lost a fortune just to escape a shadow, but the mystery of the Watcher remains unsolved. The police investigated everyone. They looked at the Langfords, the elderly neighbors. They looked at a man who used to walk his dog past the house every day. They even looked at local history buffs who were obsessed with the architecture of Westfield. They found nothing. No DNA matches. No confessions. No mistakes. The Watcher was a master of the invisible. He, or SHE, managed to terrorize a family, destroy their finances, and ruin their reputation without ever leaving a single physical trace. And here is the part that defies all standard logic. The new family that moved into 657 Boulevard, they have not received a single letter. Is it because the Watcher is gone? Or is it because the goal was never to destroy the house, but to destroy the people inside it? Think about that for a second. Today, Derek Broaddus is a man who is still looking over his shoulder. He says that the experience was like a house fire that never stops burning. He realized that in the modern world, we think we have privacy. We think our walls are our shields. But the Watcher proved that if someone is patient enough and obsessed enough, they can own your soul without ever touching your skin. So, as we finish today's story, I want you to do me a favor. Tonight, when you go home and you pull into your driveway, before you get out of your car, I want you to just look at your house. Look at the windows. Look at the shadows in the attic. Look at the spaces between the bricks and ask yourself, am I the one who is truly in charge of this home? Or is there someone in a house across the street or in a car at the end of the block who knows your children's names? Someone who knows what room you sleep in. Someone who is watching. Because as the family at 657 Boulevard learned the hard way, sometimes the most expensive thing you will ever buy is the thing that will eventually cost you everything. If you are a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you have come to the right place. Because that is all we do here. We upload new stories every single week. So, if that is of interest to you, please offer to help the like button water their plants. But instead of water, use liquid nitrogen. Then shatter their favorite ceramic pot and tell them it's for the aesthetic before walking out and never looking back. Also, please subscribe and turn on all notifications. You do not want to be the only person on Earth who doesn't know what is coming next. Now, before we get into today's story, I want you to just take a second, sit back, grab yourself a fresh cup of coffee, make it black, make it strong, because the logic of the map is about to dissolve. Are you ready? Good. Let's get into it. Imagine it is July of 1954. You are at Haneda Airport in Tokyo, Japan. It is a busy, humid, normal day. Hundreds of people are lining up at customs, showing their passports and going home. But then, a man walks up to the counter. He is dressed in a perfect suit. He looks like a successful businessman. He speaks French, but he also speaks Japanese and several other languages. He is polite. He is calm. The customs officer takes his passport, flips through the pages, and then he stops. The officer looks at the man. He looks back at the passport. He calls his supervisor. Why? Because the passport looks 100% official. It has the stamps of many countries. It looks real. It feels real. But the country listed on the cover is toward. The officer shakes his head. He says, "Sir, there is no country called toward." The man doesn't laugh. He doesn't look like he is joking. He looks insulted. He says, "What are you talking about? Taured has existed for over 1,000 years. It is between France and Spain." The officers pull out a world map. They point to the area between France and Spain, to the country we know as Andorra. The man looks at the map and his face turns white. He screams, "Where is Tord? Why is Andorra on this map? It should not be there." The logic of our world says this man is a prankster or he is crazy. But then things get much stranger. Now, I want you to feel the confusion that starts to crawl under your skin. You are standing in a small, windowless office in the heart of Tokyo's Haneda Airport. Across from you are two officers. They are holding your passport, a passport you have used for 10 years to travel the world. But they are telling you your home does not exist. You look at the map on the wall. You point to that spot between France and Spain. You know it is Taured. You were born there. You have a bank account there. You even have a driver's license issued by the Taured government. But the map says Andorra. The logic is breaking. You aren't just confused. You are terrified. You start to think maybe the whole world has gone crazy. The officers don't know what to do with you. You aren't a criminal. You have money. You have a business meeting at a major Japanese company. So they decide to hold you in a nearby hotel until they can clear up the mystery. They take you to a room on the 6th floor. They take your passport, your wallet, and your documents, and they lock them in the airport safe. Two armed guards stand outside your door. There is no balcony. There is only one window, and it is reinforced glass that does not open. You sit on the bed. You are thinking about your wife, back in Taured. You are thinking about your office. You just want to go home. But here is where the story defies all laws of physics. The next morning, the officers return to your room. They knock. No answer. They use the master key, and they open the door. The room is empty. The bed is perfectly made. Your luggage is gone. The guards swear on their lives that the door never opened. The window is still locked from the inside. There is no way for a human being to leave that room without being seen. The officers are in a panic. They rush back to the airport to check the safe. They need to see your passport to find a clue. They open the safe, and their blood turns to icy. Your passport, your driver's license, every document you gave them has disappeared. Think about that. The safe was never opened. The room was guarded by armed men. It is as if you and everything you ever owned were simply snapped out of our reality. The Japanese police launched a massive search. They checked every hotel, every boat, every plane. But they found nothing. You, the man from Taured, were just gone. But years later, a new theory emerged. A theory that suggests you weren't a traveler from a different country. You were a traveler from a different dimension. Now, let's look at the cold, scientific nightmare of this situation. The logic of our world says that if something exists, it leaves a trace. But you, the man from Taured, left nothing. You vanished from a locked room, and your documents vanished from a locked safe at the exact same time. Think about the implications. Physicists today talk about the many worlds interpretation. The idea that there are infinite versions of Earth stacked on top of each other, like pages in a book. In one version, the country in the Pyrenees is called Andorra. In another version, it is called Tord. Now, imagine that for one split second, the pages of that book stuck together. You were walking through Haneda Airport in your world, and suddenly you stepped through a door that shouldn't have been there. You didn't realize you were in a different dimension until you looked at that map. The terror you felt wasn't just confusion. It was the biological realization that you were an alien in a world that looked exactly like yours, but was fundamentally wrong. But here is the part that challenges your very existence. Some researchers believe that this happens more often than we think. Have you ever lost your keys only to find them exactly where you already looked? Have you ever had a Mandela effect memory where you swear a movie line or a brand name was different? The logic says, your memory is just bad. But the story of the man from Taured suggests something darker. It suggests that our reality is fragile. It suggests that you could be sitting in your living room, drinking your coffee, and in the blink of an eye, you could be standing in a world where your house has never been built, where your parents never met, where you do not exist. The Japanese government eventually stopped talking about the case. They didn't want to admit that they had lost a man into thin air. They called it an unsolved mystery. But there is one final twist. A piece of information that surfaced years later from a witness who was in that hotel on the same night you disappeared. Now for the final twist that will make you look at your own front door with new, terrified eyes. Years later, a night porter who worked at that hotel finally spoke out. He said that on the night you vanished, He was walking past room 612, the room where you were being held. He didn't hear a struggle. He didn't hear a window breaking. He heard a humming sound, a low vibration that made the very air in the hallway feel heavy. And then he heard a voice, your voice. But you weren't screaming for help. You were whispering. You said, "It's not the same. Even the air tastes different." And then a flash of light, so fast it was like a camera bulb going off, leaked through the crack under your door. The porter was too scared to open it. But when the officers entered the next morning, the logic of the room was gone. There were no footprints, no fingerprints. Even the dust on the nightstand had been rearranged. It is as if the universe realized its mistake. It realized that an error had occurred, and it simply deleted the file. You weren't just a man who got lost. You were a glitch, and the Matrix fixed itself. So, as you sit there tonight, finishing your coffee, I want you to do one thing. Go to your bookshelf or your kitchen drawer. Find something, anything, that proves you belong here. A birth certificate, a passport, an old photo of your childhood home. Look at it very closely. Is the name of your town spelled exactly how you remember? Is the color of your mother's eyes in that old photo the right shade of blue? Because the story of the man from Taured teaches us one terrifying truth. We are all just travelers, and we are all just one small vibration away from waking up in a world where no one has ever heard our names. The next time you walk through a crowded airport or a busy street and you feel a sudden dizzy spell, do not just keep walking. Stop. Look at the maps. Look at the people. Because you might just find that the world you left 5 minutes ago is not the world you are standing in now. If you are a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you have come to the right place. Because that is all we do here. We upload new stories every single week. So, if that is of interest to you, please offer to take the like button out to a very expensive steak dinner. But right when the bill comes, excuse yourself to the restroom and just climb out the window and let the like button pay for the whole thing, including the tip. Also, please subscribe and turn on all notifications so you do not miss any of our weekly uploads. Now, before we get into today's story, I want you to just take a second, sit back. Really lean back into your chair. Let the weight of the world leave your shoulders. Grab yourself a fresh cup of coffee, make it black, make it strong, or maybe a handful of peanuts, because we are going to be here for a very long time. Today, we are looking at a story that challenges the very logic of safety. We are taught that our home is our castle. We are taught that once the doors are locked and the windows are bolted, the world outside cannot touch us. But what if the danger is not outside? What if the danger is already in the house, breathing the same air as you, watching you from the dark corners while you sleep? Are you ready? Good. Let's get into it. Imagine it is January of 19-8-7. You are in the town of Pepperell, Massachusetts. You are 16-year-old Annie Andrews. You live in a comfortable, two-story house with your father and your sister. Your life is standard. You go to school. You do your homework. You hang out with friends. But lately, something has been wrong. It starts with small, tiny, illogical things. You are in the kitchen, and you see a glass of milk on the counter. You do not remember pouring it. You go to your room, and you find your clothes have been moved. Not stolen, just moved. You tell your father. You tell him, "Dad, I think someone is in the house." But your father is a practical man. He checks the locks. He checks the windows. Everything is secure. He tells you, "Annie, it is an old house. It makes noises. You are just being paranoid." But then the noises start. Creak, creak, creak. It is not the sound of the house settling. It is the sound of rhythmic, human footprints walking in the hallway while you are alone in your room. You open your door and the hallway is empty. The air is still, but you can feel it. A presence, a pair of eyes, watching you from the shadows. One afternoon, you and your sister are home alone. You are sitting in the living room, and you hear a thump. It is coming from inside the walls, not the attic, not the basement. The sound is coming from the space between the rooms. You look at the wallpaper, and for a split second, you see it bulge, like something or someone is pressing against it from the other side. You and your sister are terrified. You decide to hold a seance, a way to talk to what you think is a ghost. You sit in a dark room. You light a candle. You ask out loud, "Is anyone there? Give us a sign." And right then, the logic of your world shatters. Knock, knock, knock. The sound comes from the wall, right behind your head. It is not a ghost. It is a solid, heavy, human knock. You scream. You run out of the house. When your father comes home, he is angry. He thinks you are making it up for attention. He searches the closets. He searches the basement. He finds nothing. He tells you to go to bed and stop acting like a child. But 3 days later, you are in your room getting ready for bed. You glance at your closet door. You know you closed it, but now it is slightly ajar. You walk over. Your heart is hammering in your chest. You reach for the handle, and you pull the door open. Standing inside your closet, wearing your dead mother's old dress, with a blonde wig and a hatchet in his hand, is a boy. His eyes are hollow. His skin is pale. He doesn't say a word. He just smiles. And in that moment, you realize this is not a ghost. This is a human being who has been living in the crawl spaces of your walls 4 months, watching you, listening to you, and now he is done hiding. Imagine the absolute, pure, psychological horror of that moment. You are looking at a boy, wearing your mother's clothes, holding a weapon, in your own bedroom. Your father hears your screams. He rushes into the room. He sees the boy, this stranger, standing in the closet. The boy, Daniel LaPlante, does not run away like a normal burglar. He lunges. He swings the hatchet. A violent, chaotic struggle breaks out in the hallway. Your father is fighting for your lives. He manages to wrestle the hatchet away, but Daniel is fast. He is unnaturally quick. Before your father can pin him down, Daniel dives. Not out the window, not down the stairs. He dives into the wall. There is a small, hidden panel at the back of the linen closet. Daniel disappears into it, like a rat sliding into a hole. Your father tries to follow, but the space is too small. He can only hear the sound of feet scrambling deep inside the skeleton of the house. The police arrive in minutes. They surround the property. They have dogs. They have flashlights. They have guns drawn. They are certain they have him trapped. They begin to tear the house apart. They rip down the wallpaper. They smash through the drywall. And what they find defies all human logic. Inside the walls, in the narrow spaces between the rooms, Daniel had built a nest. It wasn't just a hiding spot. It was a home. He had stolen blankets. He had pillows. He had stacks of food wrappers. And most disturbingly, he had piles of your family's clothes. He had been living there, just inches away from you, for months. The police find his viewing ports, small holes drilled into the wood and disguised behind the wallpaper. He had been watching you while you were eating dinner. He had been watching you while you were sleeping. He knew your secrets. He knew your routines. He knew everything. But there is a problem. The police find the nest, but they do not find Daniel. He has vanished. Even with the house surrounded, he is gone. The officers are baffled. They search the attic. They search the basement. They even crawl through the vents. Nothing. It is as if he turned into smoke and drifted away into the night. The Andrews family can no longer stay there. They are shattered. They move to a hotel, jumping at every sound, looking over their shoulders, constantly wondering, is he still watching us? Weeks go by. The police search the woods. They search the neighboring towns. But Daniel LaPlante is a ghost. He is a master of hiding, a boy who treats the world like a twisted game of hide and seek. Eventually, the police tell the family it is safe to return. They believe Daniel has fled the state. So, the Andrews family goes back. They install new locks. They bolt the windows. They seal up the holes in the walls. They think the nightmare is over. But Daniel LaPlante was not finished. He was just warming up, because while the police were looking for him in the woods, Daniel had found a new target, a target only a few miles away. And this time, he wasn't just going to watch. He was going to take everything. Think about the sheer audacity of what happens next. Daniel LaPlante is now a wanted man. His face is in every newspaper. The police are hunting him with everything they have. Most people would run. Most people would hide in another state. But Daniel does not follow the logic of a normal criminal. He stays in the same area. He stays in the shadows. And he finds a new house. The Gustafson family lives just a few miles away. Priscilla, Gustafson is a 33-year-old nursery school teacher. She is kind, she is loved, and she is pregnant with her third child. It is December 1st, 19-A-7. Her husband, Andrew, is at work. Priscilla is at home with her two young children, 7-year-old Abigail and 5-year-old William. The house is decorated for Christmas. It is a place of warmth and love. Priscilla is a mother, a protector. She thinks she is in the safest place on earth. But outside, in the freezing winter dark, Daniel LaPlante is watching. He is not wearing a dress this time. He is dressed in all black, like a ninja. He is carrying a stolen .22 caliber rifle and a survival knife. He doesn't wait for them to sleep. He doesn't hide in the walls this time. He just walks in. Imagine you are Priscilla. You are in your kitchen, and suddenly a boy with greasy hair and hollow eyes is standing there, pointing a gun at you. He doesn't want money. He doesn't want your car. He wants to play a god. He forces Priscilla into the master bedroom. He ties her hands behind her back. He is calm. He is unnaturally quiet. Priscilla is begging for the lives of her children. She is pleading for her unborn baby. But Daniel has no empathy. He has no soul. He shoots Priscilla 3 times at point-blank range. She dies instantly in her own bed. But the horror does not end there. Daniel walks out of that bedroom. He looks at Abigail and William, 2 children who are now completely alone with a monster. He doesn't use the gun. That would be too fast. He takes the children to the upstairs bathroom. He fills the bathtub with cold water. And then, one by one, he holds them under. Imagine the struggle. Imagine the silence that followed as the bubbles stopped rising to the surface. Daniel LaPlante had wiped out an entire family in less than an hour. A pregnant mother and 2 small children. And then he does the most disturbing thing of all. He doesn't run. He doesn't panic. He stays in the house. He goes into the kitchen. He opens the refrigerator. He makes himself a snack. He sits there in the silence of a house he has just turned into a graveyard. He is eating and waiting for the husband to come home. But Andrew Gustafson is late, and for some reason, Daniel loses interest. He decides it is time to find a new place to hide. He leaves the back door open. He disappears into the snowy woods like a shadow, returning to the dark. When Andrew Gustafson arrived home later that night, he walked into a silence that felt like a physical weight. The lights were on, but the heart of the home was gone. He found Priscilla. He found Abigail. He found little William. The grief that hit that town was like a tidal wave, but the grief was quickly replaced by pure, blind fury. Every police officer in the state, every neighbor with a shotgun, every person who could walk was now part of the hunt. They knew who did it. They knew it was the ghost from the Andrews house. The logic of the search was simple. He must be miles away. He must be heading for the border. But Daniel LaPlante does not follow the logic of a fugitive. 2 days later, a neighbor a few houses down noticed something unusual. A small vent leading to the crawl space underneath their porch was slightly loose. The police descended on the house. They didn't just knock. They surrounded the porch with guns and K-9 units. An officer crawled into the dark, damp, dirt-filled space with a flashlight. He panned the light slowly from left to right, and then the beam hit a pair of eyes. Daniel LaPlante was curled up in the mud like a cold-blooded reptile. He wasn't crying. He wasn't begging. He was just staring. He had been there for 48 hours, listening to the sirens, listening to the neighbors talk about the murders, listening to the world scream for his blood. He was arrested without a single word. During the trial, Daniel showed zero remorse. He looked at the families he had destroyed with a blank, empty expression. He was sentenced to 3 consecutive life terms. He is in prison today, behind thick, concrete walls, where he belongs. But here is the part that stays with you. The Andrews family. The first family he haunted, they never truly recovered. Because even though Daniel is in prison, the logic of their safety was broken forever. They realized that a lock on a door only keeps out a stranger. It does not keep out someone who is already inside. Tonight, as you walk through your house, I want you to pay attention. If you see a shadow that looks a little too solid, if you hear a scratching behind your headboard that you assume is just a mouse, ask yourself, do I really know who is in this house with me? Because Daniel LaPlante proved that the walls do not just hold up the roof. Sometimes the walls are hiding a monster, and sometimes he has been watching you much longer than you think. If you are a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you have come to the right place. Because on this channel, we don't just tell stories. We dissect the moment where human ambition crosses the line into a fatal mechanical failure. So, if you're ready to step into a world made of air and plastic that was never meant to touch the sky, please offer to help the like button secure their garden tent. But while they're reaching for the stakes, replace all the ropes with strands of spider silk. Tell them, the wind is your friend now, and then disappear before the first breeze hits the trees. Also, please subscribe and turn on all notifications, because in a structure held together by pressure, one single breath can be the difference between a dream and a funeral. Now, settle in. Feel the weight of the air in the room. Grab your coffee and listen closely, because today, we aren't talking about a haunted house or a secret government bunker. We are talking about an art exhibit, a masterpiece of color and light that was designed to bring peace and serenity to the world. But as we are about to see, the logic of good enough is the most dangerous logic of all. Imagine it is July 23rd, 20-06. You are in Riverside Park in Chesterley Street, England. The sun is shining. The park is full of families. and in the center of the green, there is something that looks like it was dropped from another dimension. It is called dream space. It's a massive, sprawling network of interconnected rooms, half the size of a professional soccer field. It's made of 2,500 square meters of PVC, the same plastic used for shower curtains. Inside, it's a labyrinth of glowing colors and ambient music. It is a liminal space, a place between reality and a dream. The creator is Maurice Agus, a 74-year-old artist who has spent 40 years preparing for this moment. This is his legacy, his exclamation point. But on this morning, Maurice is frustrated. The exhibit was supposed to open hours ago. There are technical hiccups. The staff is rushing. The line of people outside is getting long and angry. Maurice looks at the structure. He sees that several of the heavy-duty anchor points, the massive ropes designed to keep this plastic mountain pinned to the earth, are not yet secured. Now, think about the pneumatic logic. A structure this size, filled with air, acts like a giant sail. It is subject to the laws of lift and drag. Even a light breeze hitting that much surface area creates tons of upward force. But Maurice is a perfectionist who is running out of time. He sees the people waiting. He sees his career reaching its peak. And he makes a decision that defies every rule of safety. He tells his staff to stop. He says the anchors they have already installed are good enough. He tells them to open the doors. Among the first people to walk inside is 68-year-old Elizabeth Collins and her 14-year-old grandson. They are mesmerized. They move through the blue rooms, the green rooms, feeling the soft plastic floors beneath their feet. Elizabeth feels her body relax. She is immersed in the serenity. But then, the wind picks up. Just a light summer breeze. Suddenly, a deafening snap echoes through the park. It's the sound of the few remaining anchors being ripped out of the soil like toothpicks. Inside the blue room, Elizabeth suddenly feels a floating sensation. She looks down and realizes her feet are no longer touching the ground. She isn't walking anymore. She is ascending. The dream has just turned into a projectile. Now, let's look at the kinetic nightmare of what happened at 3:15 p.m. When that final anchor snapped, the logic of gravity was replaced by the logic of flight. Dream Space was no longer an art exhibit. It had become a 2,500 square meter kite, fueled by a light breeze that had suddenly found a way to get under the plastic skin. Inside the structure, Elizabeth Collins and dozens of other visitors didn't just feel a tilt. They felt the world invert. Imagine you are at a room with no windows, only glowing colorful walls. Suddenly, the floor beneath you becomes the ceiling. The gravity that held you safe is gone. You are being tossed against the PVC walls like a doll in a washing machine. And as the structure climbed higher, reaching 30 feet, the height of a 3-story building, the physics of the inflatable began to disintegrate. Because the exhibit wasn't anchored at the back, the wind began to twist the plastic. It started to wring the structure like a wet towel. And as it twisted, the air pressure inside began to spike, forcing the exit flaps and the seams to burst open. On the ground, Maurice Agus and the horrified crowd watched in a state of paralysis. They weren't just looking at a balloon. They were looking at a sky burial in progress. Witnesses reported seeing human shapes pressed hard against the translucent plastic from the inside. They saw hands clawing at the yellow and red walls, trying to find a way out before the structure hit the power lines nearby. And then the ejection began. As dream space contorted in the wind, it began to spit people out through the ruptured seams. One witness described it as watching fruit fall from a tree. But it wasn't fruit. It was human beings falling 30 feet onto the hard, unforgiving grass of Riverside Park. Think about the traumatic logic for the people still inside. Elizabeth Collins was trapped in a section that was folding in on itself. As the structure struck a metal pole, the plastic tore open completely. In a split second, the serenity of the blue room was replaced by the cold, rushing air of the English summer. Elizabeth was thrown out into the void. She didn't fall into water. She didn't fall onto a safety net. She fell onto the very ground, where, just 10 minutes earlier, she had been enjoying a peaceful walk with her grandson. But the most haunting detail for the investigators who arrived later wasn't the fall itself. It was the sound of the music. Even as the structure lay crumpled on the ground like a dead, colorful skin, even as the screams of the 27 injured victims filled the park, the hidden speakers inside the wreckage were still playing. The dreamy, ambient, meditative music continued to echo through the blood-stained plastic, a soundtrack of peace for a scene of absolute carnage. The logic of the artist had survived the crash, but the people had not. When the emergency services began to cut through the PVC to find the survivors, they realized that the dream had become a vacuum trap. The collapsing plastic was so heavy and so airtight that those who weren't killed by the fall were now suffocating inside their own masterpiece. Now, let's look at the criminal logic that emerged during the trial of Maurice Agus. In the aftermath of the disaster, as the colorful plastic of dream space was hauled away in pieces, the police didn't just find a broken artwork. They found a crime scene. The investigation turned from a tragic accident into a full-scale forensic audit of Maurice Agus's decision-making process. And what they found challenged the very definition of responsibility. Investigators discovered that the structure was designed to be held down by 80 distinct anchor points. 80. But on the afternoon of July 23rd, when the wind hit the park at only 12 miles per hour, more than half of those anchors were missing. Now, think about the mechanical logic. A structure this light, essentially a giant sail, requires absolute symmetry in its tension. If you anchor the front but leave the back loose, you aren't building a building. You are building a lever. When the wind got under the loose rear section, it didn't just lift it. It used the anchored front as a hinge, snapping the remaining ropes with a force equivalent to several tons of pressure. But the most damning piece of evidence was a conversation that took place just 1 hour before the doors opened. A member of the safety staff had approached Maurice and warned him. They told him the wind was picking up. They told him the rear anchors weren't deep enough in the soil, but Morris's logic was blinded by ego. He had spent his entire life working toward this moment. He saw the line of paying customers. He saw the success of the Pamarin within his grasp. He reportedly brushed off the warning, saying he was a perfectionist, but that the current setup was good enough. Think about that phrase. Good enough. In the world of structural engineering, good enough is another word for fatal. During the trial at Newcastle Crown Court, the prosecution painted a picture of an artist who had become a rogue engineer. They revealed that Dream Space had suffered minor liftoff incidents in previous cities, specifically in Germany and earlier in the UK. The warning signs had been there for years. The structure had screamed at Maurice that it was unstable, but instead of redesigning the safety system, he simply ignored the data. The court heard how the victims, including Elizabeth Collins, were essentially trapped in a plastic cage with no way to escape once the lift began. There were no emergency exits that functioned under high-altitude tension. The logic of peace and serenity had been built on a foundation of pure volatility. When the jury looked at the photos of the crumpled, blood-stained plastic, they didn't see an artist. They saw a man who had gambled with human lives to protect his reputation. Maurice Agus was convicted of negligence. He was fined. He was humiliated. But the real, psychological verdict came from Maurice himself. He sat in the courtroom, a broken 74-year-old man, listening to the descriptions of Elizabeth's final moments. He realized that his masterpiece, the thing he wanted to be remembered for, would now only be known as the killer balloon. He made a vow in that courtroom that haunted the local art world. He promised he would never create again. But as the case closed, a new, more disturbing detail surfaced from the survivors. Several people who were inside the structure when it lifted claimed that just before the snap, the colors of the rooms began to shift into patterns that shouldn't have been possible with the lighting system. They claimed that for a few seconds, they weren't in a park in England anymore. They were in a liminal void where the logic of the earth no longer applied. Now, let's look at the criminal logic that emerged during the trial of Maurice Agus. In the aftermath of the disaster, as the colorful plastic of Dream Space was hauled away in pieces, the police didn't just find a broken artwork. They found a crime scene. The investigation turned from a tragic accident into a full-scale forensic audit of Maurice Agus's decision-making process. And what they found challenged the very definition of responsibility. Investigators discovered that the structure was designed to be held down by 80 distinct anchor points. 80. But on the afternoon of July 23rd, when the wind hit the park at only 12 miles per hour, more than half of those anchors were missing. Now, think about the mechanical logic. A structure this light, essentially a giant sail, requires absolute symmetry in its tension. If you anchor the front but leave the back loose, you aren't building a building. You are building a lever. When the wind got under the loose rear section, it didn't just lift it. It used the anchored front as a hinge, snapping the remaining ropes with a force equivalent to several tons of pressure. But the most damning piece of evidence was a conversation that took place just 1 hour before the doors opened. A member of the safety staff had approached Maurice and warned him. They told him the wind was picking up. They told him the rear anchors weren't deep enough in the soil. But Maurice's logic was blinded by ego. He had spent his entire life working toward this moment. He saw the line of paying customers. He saw the success of the hammering within his grasp. He reportedly brushed off the warning, saying he was a perfectionist, but that the current setup was good enough. Think about that phrase. Good enough. In the world of structural engineering, good enough is another word for fatal. During the trial at Newcastle Crown Court, the prosecution painted a picture of an artist who had become a rogue engineer. They revealed that Dream Space had suffered minor liftoff incidents in previous cities, specifically in Germany and earlier. In the UK, the warning signs had been there for years. The structure had screamed at Maurice that it was unstable, but instead of redesigning the safety system, he simply ignored the data. The court heard how the victims, including Elizabeth Collins, were essentially trapped in a plastic cage with no way to escape once the lift began. There were no emergency exits that functioned under high-altitude tension. The logic of peace and serenity had been built on a foundation of pure volatility. When the jury looked at the photos of the crumpled, blood-stained plastic, they didn't see an artist. They saw a man who had gambled with human lives to protect his reputation. Maurice Agus was convicted of negligence. He was fined. He was humiliated. But the real, psychological verdict came from Maurice himself. He sat in the courtroom, a broken 74-year-old man, listening to the descriptions of Elizabeth's final moments. He realized that his masterpiece, the thing he wanted to be remembered for, would now only be known as the killer balloon. He made a vow in that courtroom that haunted the local art world. He promised he would never create again. But as the case closed, a new, more disturbing detail surfaced from the survivors. Several people who were inside the structure when it lifted claimed that just before the snap, the colors of the rooms began to shift into patterns that shouldn't have been possible with the lighting system. They claimed that for a few seconds, they weren't in a park in England anymore. They were in a liminal void where the logic of the earth no longer applied. Now for the cold, final calculation of the Dream Space disaster. After the trial, after the fines, and after the world turned its back on him, Maurice Agus became a ghost in his own life. The logic of a 40-year career was gone. In its place was a singular, crushing reality. He had designed a sanctuary, but he had delivered a coffin. Friends of the artist reported that in his final years, Maurice couldn't look at a bright color without shaking. He couldn't hear ambient music without hearing the screams of Elizabeth Collins. He died in 20-09. exactly 3 years after his masterpiece took flight. Some say it was age, but those who knew him said his heart simply couldn't withstand the pressure of the guilt. But the anomaly of dream space didn't die with him. Think about the liminal logic of that structure. In the years since 20-06, people who have visited the site of the disaster in Riverside Park have reported a strange sensation. They claim that on quiet, sunny afternoons, when the wind is just right, you can still see the grass undulating, as if something invisible and massive is still resting there, trying to breathe. Some survivors of the flight, the people who were thrown 30 feet into the air, suffer from a specific kind of trauma. They don't dream of falling. They dream of ascending. They dream of a world where there is no floor, where the walls are made of translucent, glowing skin, and where a low, vibrating hum tells them that they are, finally, where they belong. The logic of our safety regulations tells us that this was just a technical error, a failure of ropes and stakes. But the logic of the strange tells us something else. It tells us that when we build structures designed to disconnect us from reality, when we create spaces that have no corners, no windows, and no shadows, we are inviting the void to move in. Maurice Agus wanted to give the world a dream, but he forgot that a dream is only a dream as long as it stays inside your head. The moment you try to inflate it into the physical world, you have to be ready for the nightmare to wake up to. Today, dream space exists only in grainy police photos and suppressed video footage. It is a warning to every creator and every dreamer. The logic of good enough is a death sentence. And the next time you walk into a colorful, peaceful room with no windows, and the music starts to play, and you feel your body begin to relax, just do one thing for me. Look down, check your feet, and make sure they are still touching the ground, because the wind is always watching. If you are a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious, delivered in story format, then you have come to the right place. Because that is all we do here. We upload new stories every single week. So, if that is of interest to you, please offer to help the like button carry their groceries to their car. But once they pop the trunk, just jump inside, lock the doors from the inside, and refuse to come out until they promise to subscribe to this channel. Also, please subscribe and turn on all notifications so you do not miss any of our weekly uploads. Now, before we get into today's story, I want you to just take a second, sit back. I mean, really lean back into your chair. Let the weight of the world leave your shoulders. Grab yourself a fresh cup of coffee, make it black, make it strong, or maybe a handful of peanuts, because we are going to be here for a very long time. Today, we are looking at a story that challenges the very logic of fear. We are taught that if someone is chasing you, you should go to the police. We are taught that a crowded airport is the safest place on earth. But today's story is about a man who found the safest place on earth to be the most dangerous. A man who ran away from help and disappeared into thin air. Are you ready? Good. Let's get into it. Imagine It is July of 2014. You are 28-year-old Lars Mittank, a normal, healthy, young man from Germany. You are on vacation with your friends in Varna, Bulgaria. You are having a great time, drinking, laughing, enjoying the beach. But then, the logic of your vacation turns dark. You get into a small scuffle at a restaurant over football. Someone hits you, and you suffer a ruptured eardrum. The doctor tells you you cannot fly yet. The pressure in the airplane could make your ear explode. Your friends have to leave. They offer to stay, but you say, "No, I'll be fine. I'll just stay one more night and catch a flight tomorrow." You check into a cheap hotel near the airport, but the moment your friends leave, your behavior becomes illogical. You call your mother in the middle of the night. You are whispering. You tell her, "Mom, I'm scared. There are 4 men following me. They are asking about my medication. I don't think they are going to let me leave." Your mother is terrified. She hears the panic in your voice. You tell her you are hiding high up in the hotel, watching the streets. The next morning, July 8th, you arrive at the Varna airport. You go to the airport doctor just to get one last checkup before your flight. You look tired, you look stressed, but you are almost home. But while you are sitting in the doctor's office, a man in a construction uniform walks into the room. He doesn't say anything. He just walks in. And for some reason, that defies all human understanding. You snap. You stand up. You leave all your luggage, your wallet, your passport, and your cell phone on the doctor's table. And you start to run. You sprint out of the office. You sprint through the terminal. You run past the security guards. You run out the front doors. The CCTV camera catches you, jumping over a 10-foot barbed wire fence and disappearing into a massive, dark sunflower field. And that is the last time anyone ever sees Lars Mittank. Now, let's look at the broken logic of those final 24 hours. After the doctor told Lars he couldn't fly, he was prescribed an antibiotic called cefuroxime 500. To most people, this is a standard medicine. But for Lars, it might have been the match that started the fire. He checks into the Hotel Color, a budget hotel in a rough part of Varna. And this is where the story gets strange. CCTV cameras at the hotel show Lars pacing the hallways. He is hiding in the elevator. He is looking out the windows, as if he is expecting an assassin to walk through the front door. He calls his mother again. This time, he tells her to cancel his credit cards. Why? He doesn't say. He just tells her, "They are coming. I have to go." Imagine being his mother, thousands of miles away, hearing your son, a grown man, sound like a terrified child in a foreign country. The logic says Lars was suffering from a psychotic break, a rare but real side effect of the ear injury, or perhaps the medication. But the locals in Bulgaria have a different theory. They say that Varna is a hub for organ trafficking. They say that the men who hit Lars at the restaurant were not just football fans. They were predators. They saw a young, healthy German man, and they saw Prophet. Did Lars see something he wasn't supposed to see? Was he actually being followed by men who wanted his life? The next morning, when Lars arrives at the airport, he looks haunted. He walks into the doctor's office, a place of healing, a place of safety. But when that construction worker walks in, Lars doesn't see a worker. He sees an enemy. The doctor said Lars screamed, "I don't want to die here. I have to get out." Think about the pure, blind terror required to make a man jump over a 10-foot fence covered in razor wire. Lars didn't just climb it. He flew over it. He was fueled by an adrenaline that defies human biology. He lands on the other side, in a field of sunflowers that are 6 feet tall, a sea of yellow and green stretching for miles. He runs into the field, and the sunflowers swallow him whole. No passport, no money, no phone, just a man in a yellow t-shirt running into the heart of the unknown. The police searched the field with dogs. They used thermal cameras. They used drones. But it is as if Lars Mittank stepped into another dimension. But months later, the story takes a turn that is even more confusing. Think about the cruel logic of hope. For years, the image of Lars Mittank running out of that airport has been shared millions of times. He is known as the most famous missing person on YouTube. And because of that fame, the sightings began. People all over Europe started seeing a ghost. In 2015, a truck driver in Germany claimed he picked up a hitchhiker who looked exactly like Lars. The man was thin, he was confused, and he spoke in riddles. But before the driver could call the police, the man jumped out of the truck at a red light and vanished into the woods. In 2019, a photo surfaced from Brazil. It showed a homeless man with a long beard wandering the streets. The internet went into a frenzy. Is it him? Is it Lars? But the logic of reality is often a punch to the gut. The man was identified, and he was not Lars Mittank. So we have to ask the most terrifying question of all. What happened in that sunflower field? Some believe that Lars, in his state of pure paranoia, hid so well that he eventually succumbed to the elements. They believe he is still there, just inches beneath the soil, or hidden in the deep brush, where the dogs couldn't find him. But others believe in something darker. They believe Lars was a victim of a slow kidnapping, that the men he was afraid of, the men he told his mother about, were waiting for him on the other side of that fence. They believe the run across the airport was not an escape, but a stampede driving him right into the arms of his predators. Imagine being Lars. You think you are running to freedom. You think you are escaping the monsters. But the sunflowers are not a hiding place. They are a trap. The Bulgarian authorities have closed the case multiple times, but his mother, Sandra Mittank, has never stopped looking. She has spent her life savings. She has hired private detectives. She has traveled to Bulgaria dozens of times. She refuses to accept the logic of death. But as the years pass, the mystery only grows. It has become a digital legend, a warning to every traveler that your life can change in a single frantic sprint. Lars Mittank's luggage is still sitting in a police evidence room. His passport is expired. His phone is dead. And the man who wore the yellow t-shirt is still running in the minds of everyone who has seen that footage. But there is one final theory that is the most illogical of them all. What if the logic of the chase was all inside his head? Psychologists have a term for this. It is called a fugue state. It is a rare, dissociative disorder where a person suddenly loses their identity and wanders away from their home and their life. Imagine the combination of a head injury, a foreign antibiotic, and the stress of being alone in a strange country. Lars's brain might have simply broken. In his mind, the construction worker was an assassin. In his mind, the airport was a prison, and the sunflower field was the only place left to disappear. But the most haunting part of this theory is that a person in a fugue state can start a new life. They don't remember who they were. They don't remember their mother. They are just someone new, wandering the earth with a blank slate for a soul. Is Lars Mittank living in a small village in Eastern Europe right now? Does he have a new name? Does he look in the mirror and wonder why he feels a sudden flash of terror whenever he sees a yellow t-shirt? The logic of the world demands an answer. We want a body, or we want a homecoming. We want the story to end. But for Lars Mittank, the story is stuck in a perpetual loop. Every time someone clicks on that video, he is still running. He is still looking over his shoulder. He is still 1 second away from jumping that fence. He has become a ghost in the machine. A digital warning that the line between a happy vacation and a total disappearance is as thin as a whisper on a long-distance phone call. So, the next time you are in a foreign place and you feel that sudden, irrational prickle of fear on the back of your neck, do not just ignore it, but also do not start running. Because as Lars Mittank proved, sometimes when you run away from the shadows, you are just running deeper into the dark. And once the sunflowers close behind you, there is no way back.